Hey, welcome to the show, everybody. This is the Leadership Toolkit, as you know, your definitive leadership podcast for your personal growth, to grow you and the people around you. We have all kinds of amazing conversations regarding love, life, family, business, entrepreneurship. And the biggest goal is that we affect change in our environments that are around us, and certainly that comes through positive infection of other people. Today's no different. I've got an awesome guest on the show. I'm really stoked. We have a lot of parallels. I was sitting chatting with him beforehand. He's the author of this book here, The Self-Disciplined Man, Richard Bischoff, who's a speaker. He's been a leader on his soccer teams. He's a dad. He's a business person. He's an entrepreneur. He's currently building an awesome community of self-disciplined and strong men. And I've got him on the show today. So Richard, welcome to the Leadership Toolkit, my friend.
Oh, Mike, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So if you would sort of fill in the gaps a little bit for our audience, for our folks here, tell a little bit, some of your background, some of your leadership journey, and where you're at in business. And let's get into having a really productive conversation today.
Yeah, absolutely. Growing up, like most people, you don't really think about leadership when you're a kid. I never really saw myself necessarily as a leader in the sense that I never strived to be the leader. But over time, you kind of just fall into certain roles. So I would say as I was younger, in my early teens, playing soccer, when you're the captain of the soccer team, you're in a leadership role without really trying to get a leadership role. Same among just my peer group. When you're the person that other people are coming to for advice on different stuff, you kind of just naturally kind of take on a leadership role without really thinking about it. It wasn't until I got into network marketing, or what people call multi-level marketing, which I got into by accident, which is a whole nother story. But it wasn't until I got into there where some of the leaders reached out to me and said, "Man, you are a phenomenal leader. You have so much potential." And people were speaking life into me in the leadership area. And it really I took on a whole nother level of desire to become a better leader. And so that's really where the leadership journey took off, probably in my late 20s.
That's awesome. And so you've been doing, you've been leading others. I know you're involved in retail mortgages.
Yeah.
Again, part of your journey, you brought up, hey, I'm, being a single dad and trying to, navigate business, and besides, growing yourself, growing others, and growing a
Right.
business and so forth. Do you have some sort of secret sauce? This is probably a longer question, right? Do you have like a secret sauce to how were you balancing that, being like a Superman dad and business person and all of these other pieces that fit together? Do you have something that you can say, man, this contributed to that?
Well, I mean, I think when it comes down to it, if you don't have a choice per se, you're kind of forced to do stuff. I think one of the problems in today's society is we have so many choices, so many options. If you're not happy with your marriage, get divorced. There's 30,000 people online. If you're not happy with your job, there's tons of other jobs. So go get another job. If you're not happy with whatever, you can just replace it. And so in my situation, when I got sole custody of my kids, and I was starting a new career in the mortgage business, I didn't have a choice. I had to figure out a way to make a multiple six-figure income in a brand new industry while only putting in about 20 to 30 hours a week into it, because I had to be there for drop-offs and pickups for the kids, for field trips, for doctor's appointments, and for everything else that comes along with fatherhood. So, yeah, I mean, I guess my secret sauce would be what I kind of wrote about in the book, was just having that discipline and being structured. I think a lot of people would do much better in life and be more time efficient if they had set structure and set disciplines and really set standards that they held themselves to.
Yeah. So one of the things, there's two things I want to hang on here for a second. One is, you said you found yourself in what many would call an MLM. I've
Yep.
participated in many multi-level marketing
Yep.
programs. Some are legitimate businesses, some
Yeah.
not so much. But you said you found yourself there by accident. Can you expand on that? How do you mean by accident?
Yeah, so I grew up and my mom had the Mary Kay lady come over to the house to sell the Mary Kay, the Avon lady come over to the house, the Shackley lady come over to the house. So I was totally against sales growing up just because I knew what it felt like for someone to try to sell you. And I was like, I don't want
Sure.
to be a person to make someone else feel that way. And so like I had what now I can look back and it was the wrong perception of sales, but at the time I wanted nothing to do with sales. So I was a personal trainer from 19 to about 29, 30 years old. And I was in the gym and the guy walked into the gym trying to sell us on these health supplements. And I was just like, man, I am not interested at all. He's like, well, you can make money. And I was like, man, I don't know you. You walked in off the street. You're trying to tell me to sell this product to make money. I'm not interested in that. So I said no to him twice. Then the third time he came in, he left some product there for us to try. And it was their newest product. It was a healthy energy drink. And
Okay.
all my friends were drinking Red Bulls and Rockstar and Monster. And I was like, if this is legit, if this is really a healthy energy drink, I could see where it'd have some potential. So I tried it. I became a customer. I didn't have a desire to sell it. I was like, I just became a customer. And then I had some people come up to me at the gym, ask me what it was. They never seen it before. Where could they buy it? So I went back to the guy. I said, hey, can you bring some more for them? And he was like, it's all done online. You have a free link as a customer. Send them to your link. You'll get a paycheck. So that's how it started.
Wow.
I got a $4 paycheck, then a $20 paycheck, and then it just kept growing. And before I knew it, I was, making $4,000 a month. And it got to the point where I had a team of 3,000 people in 21 countries. And I was the number 35th highest paid person in the company, speaking on stage in front of 10,000 people. So it was definitely by accident.
That's crazy, man. And I mean, the cool part of that story, there's a couple things I pick out of it is for anybody, I always encourage people as they're listening to the show, like take notes, right? You're going to gain some insight when we're having these conversations. One of the things is, I think people need to realize there's a lot of times that opportunities are presented to us, quote unquote, by accident,
Yeah.
right? And one of the things that we have to realize is it's important to keep an open mind. I mean, like you were saying, hey, okay, I'll try it as a customer, but then all of a sudden it opens your mind, sort of like that parachute
Right.
to other things. The other thing I want you to expand on, you said, well, hey, I didn't want to be a salesperson.
Mm.
Can you pinpoint a time what changed your mind? Was it through this MLM process with the energy drinks or something else?
Yeah. So 3 months into the network marketing thing. So I was still just not really thinking of it as a business. My dad, who owns a business, my dad owns a carpet cleaning company here in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. It's the largest one in town. He's owned it for 38 years. And he was going to a marketing and sales conference in Arizona, and it was 20 minutes away from the headquarters of this company of network marketing. So I went with him, and one of the things the guy said at the sales conference that really stood out to me, and this is back in 2008, and he said, sales is one of the most ethical businesses you can be in if what you're providing to the end consumer is of greater value than what they're paying for it. And I was like, wow, that's so true. A lot of people don't hear about things unless someone is selling it to them or marketing it to them. And as long as what they're trading their money for, it's worth more than that, or to them it is at least, then it is of value. So that is what changed my mindset. And I just had, obviously it's how you sell. It's how you present, and also what you're selling. So that makes a big
Sure.
difference.
Right. I mean, there's a reason they used to call people, or there are some people that are quote unquote snake oil salespeople. Right. And I've been in sales forever. Another parallel, I fell into sales by accident, going through my own, turmoil in life's changes, ended up in automotive sales. I used to joke about this many times because I said, I don't think that anybody, unless their parents are in the used car business, nobody starts out and goes, I really want to be a used car salesman. Right.
That's very true.
So, but again, your perception changes as you're selling the product, as you're engaging with people, as you're making things, change. I love that statement. You said sales is one of the most ethical businesses based on, and I'm shorthanding it here, based on the value you're providing with
Right.
that product. I think it's excellent.
Right.
Before we get too far off, I always do this. I start off in the conversation and we just head down the path. I do want to point out, and especially for people, if you're listening on the audio podcast later, you can connect with Richard. He and I were talking beforehand. Check him out on Instagram. So IG, Instagram.com/Richard Bischoff. It's RichardBischoff. So you can check him out on Instagram. You can look him up that way on Amazon if you want to get the book. I started reading his book this last week. It's called The Self-Disciplined Man. And I will compliment you publicly. I said this beforehand. I love the way in which it's written. It's very just common language, written from the heart, genuine, easy to read. And it's one of those things, for myself, it's easy to connect with. So it's
Right.
like going into this conversation, I feel like, though we just met 10 minutes ago, I feel like I know you, man.
Right.
The other thing that I wanted to point out that Richard has, as he's growing himself, his business, and the people around him, he does have a men's group online. You can check that out at school.com, SKOOL.com. And it's the Stronger Men Club. So it's THE-Stronger, STRONGER-Men-Club-4756. So I just spell that out so that if people are listening to the audio version, they can grab that as well. So moving on let me ask you, if you don't mind, Richard, what parallels do you see starting off in sales and moving into management and leadership? What are some things that served you well in sales to get into some of those management and leadership roles that you've taken on?
Well, I would say it comes down to really two things. One was being a good student of the leaders ahead of me. That's one of the things I love best about the network marketing industry was that it's basically a personal development school. You have so many leaders who are invested in your success and want you to succeed. And that's where I learned about Jim Rohn and Napoleon Hill and Bob Proctor and so many great leaders and speakers. So I became a student of leadership and a student of personal development. So that would be one. And then the second part would be learning to lead myself first. If you're good at sales, you obviously are good at leading yourself. And so for me, once I was good enough at leading myself and set, I guess, some sort of track record, it was much easier then to turn around and lead others to a certain extent, because they saw that I had some success, and which gave me credibility with them, but also I was able to transfer what I learned and what I was doing into them.
I love that. I've said it many times on this show myself, and in some of the other videos I've shared, is you have to, the first person you got to get to, the first person you got to connect with and to lead is you. I remember, I will share this story because it was so impactful to me. Long about 2007, I was in one of my first real adult leadership roles, just like what you were saying, like, hey, we end up in these different roles in our lives. But I was moved into a sort of a junior manager role in the automotive dealership. And I will never forget this. And he's still one of my mentors today. The owner came in and I was just, gloomy and crappy, and we weren't selling cars, and we can't figure out why, right? Why are we not selling this? And he said straight up to me, he's like, man, yeah, it's because you have a shitty attitude. And he asked me this one question. He says, let me ask you a question. If you were working here, would you follow you? And to this day, that's still, even now, here we are, 15 to almost 20 years later, for goodness sake. And I remember that plain as day. Like that is something that has been a guiding light for me, is it's like, okay, well, if I'm leading people, would I follow me? And so I think that's so valuable that you share that and you say, hey, you got to lead yourself first, be a good student and then lead yourself. And I want to, you sent some really good discussion topics too. I want to make sure and get to those. But before we do, I want to ask, when you're saying to be a good student, because if you're leading yourself, you have to be, a good student, you have to be deliberate out seeking growth patterns. What are some ways now? Because it's one thing to have people pour into you. I think you said that. You said, hey, multi-level marketing people, everybody's jazzed about personal development. What are some ways that you might recommend for someone that's wanting to get into leadership, or somebody that is in leadership, that they could be deliberate in going to seek learning? What are some things that you would, maybe some activities or some specific, books or online programs and such that you would recommend to people to seek out?
Yeah, well, I mean, the first thing and the cheapest thing is going to be the find leadership books. I mean, it's always easiest to start with John Maxwell just because he's like the godfather of leadership and leadership books. So that's the simple way to kind of get started. But I find that a lot of people, well, don't even do that for one, but the people who do that, a lot of them just, that's it. They buy a book, they read a couple chapters, they normally don't even finish it, and it kind of stops there. So my better recommendation is for them to really either join a group where they're getting mentored, because one-on-one mentorship is expensive. If you can afford that, then by all means do that.
Sure.
But to join a group event. So I personally am always in growth mode. Like I'm always wanting to get better and sharpen my skills, and not even just to sharpen my skills. I want to expose my weaknesses, and sometimes you need other people to do that. And so I just spent $3,000 and joined a 12-week leadership group. So there's so many different ways, from as cheap as buying a book or joining a group or doing one-on-one. The last thing I would say would be to start volunteering and putting yourself in leadership roles, starting even in a small way, maybe at your local community or volunteer somewhere or at a church. I think some of the best leaders I've ever worked with were leaders where people volunteered to follow them, whether it be a pastor or a church program or in network marketing. I wasn't paying any of these people to join me. I was painting a vision and they wanted to follow me. You look at Jesus and he had his 12 disciples, and now there's billions of people who follow that religion, and he didn't pay them to do it. So, it's totally different being in a job where people are your employees and they're paid to do what you have to say versus a volunteer leadership role. And that's where people can get a lot of great experience by volunteering and building up into a leadership role that way.
Oh, that's very strong, man. I love that statement. And I love the example you pointed out, Jesus, right? It's talk about lead by example, right? It's just, hey, and it goes from him to the 12 disciples to the rest of the world. As you're talking about having vision, because that's something that's a perfect segue. Actually, I have two segues here. One is Richard brought up the point. He says, join a group, be a part of a community. Oftentimes, we think about like the direct community. I'll put up on the screen again. Richard is building a community. It's a men's community called the Stronger Men Club. And not that to just continue to pitch that, but I think it's valuable, and especially as we're talking about it right then, like here's your opportunity. I'll have the link in the show notes, but people should definitely check that out right now. That's an opportunity to connect, almost one-on-one with you at this point, right?
Yeah, and it's free for the first 100 members. And like I said, I just started this, so I think we have 28 in there. So there will be plenty of room for anybody on this call to hop in for free, and then from there it could change to where it's paid per month. But yeah, in that we focus on faith, family, fitness, and finances, and just growing as men in those areas and becoming as strong as we can be in those areas.
Love it. So definitely people should sign up for that. When we're talking about vision, first off, do you have a method to define vision for yourself so you're able to get that vision out to others? How do you define vision? Where do you start?
I mean, vision for me really comes down to a calling or a passion, like something that's just so ingrained in you that you feel like you have to do it. Like you have to start this new business, or you have to start this nonprofit, or you have to hit this certain goal. And then from that desire, you kind of build out your vision. What does that look like? And so now that's obviously different when it's just you personally versus you in a business, and maybe you're a middle manager, and so you don't really get to choose your vision. maybe the higher up say, hey, here's our vision, go get the people to follow it or execute so we can hit this vision. So it can be different, but from a personal standpoint, my vision really I try to align it with my passions and my purpose of what I feel like what's going to impact my family, my community, and sometimes your pocketbook. I mean, obviously you have business and financial goals and the vision for that. So I typically tell people you need to have a vision and a plan in every aspect of your life, whether it's physically, you should have a vision of what you want your body to look like and a plan to get that. And the same goes with business, and the same goes with your marriage. So few people have a vision for their family and marriage. It's actually sad. I was talking to a guy the other day, and he's talking about divorce, and I was like, well, that probably wasn't in your vision when you first started. So what happened to your vision? He goes, man, I never had a vision. We were in love, we got married and had kids, and we never really planned out our future. And that's not really being a good leader of your family. So I think that more people need to have a vision for every aspect of their life.
So when you talk about that, and you're talking about, because a minute ago you were talking about, fitness and finances and business and these different areas of life. Do you actually sit down and write down, hey, here's the vision, here's the goal for my physical goals, my fitness goals. Here's the vision, here's the goal financially. Here's the vision, here's the goal business wise. How do you sort of take that vision from that ethereal space between our ears and get it out into the world?
Absolutely. So when it comes to fitness, because I actually just did a 12-week transformation, because my second book just came out, and it's from dad bod to six pack in just 12 weeks. So I went through it, and I did it myself, and I just competed in a bodybuilding contest last weekend. And so I had to paint that vision of what I wanted my body to look like. So I went out and I started watching these YouTube videos on competitive bodybuilders. And then I started to, on my mirror, I wrote down which weight I needed to be at the stage weight, and then worked it way backwards, how much weight I needed to lose each week. My workout plan was written out and in front of me. My diet plan is on my refrigerator, so I could see it, part of that vision aspect every single day. I knew what I was going to eat. And I even tell people when I coach them on the fitness side is, whether it's an old picture of you when you used to be in shape, or a picture of somebody else that you want to get to the shape, have that in front of you, have that vision, let it be ingrained into your head on why you're doing this. Because there's going to be times you don't want to stick to that diet, or you don't want to go to the gym, or you don't want to do the cardio, and you got to have this vision so ingrained in your head that you stick to it. So that's what I would say from a physical standpoint. Now, with my fiance, I actually got these big poster boards, and I said, let's write out our dream life. Kind of like a vision board, but let's write out our dream life. I was like, if it was up to you, how many vacations would you take a year? What type of car would you drive? Would you have credit card debt or no credit card debt if it was up to you and it was your dream board? And so we started writing out all this stuff, and it was a pretty awesome board. And then I looked at her and I said, okay, what do we got to do to achieve this life? We got to give up some stuff. We got to give up the going out to eat Friday night, Saturday, Sunday night, and spending $400 every weekend on food. We got to prioritize our goals for this vision. And then it was much easier for her to buy into the vision. Also, it was much easier for her to buy into the sacrifice, because she knew what she was sacrificing for. And if more people did that in their marriages, they would understand, they'd have a visual of why they're sacrificing in certain areas for the greater vision.
So how does that translate then to business? Because I got to compliment you. I love the fact that, because for me too, like that's the central piece. My family, that's why we do what we do, right? Mm-hmm. That's why any of us, I think most people, that's why we get into those leadership roles. I guess there are people that are driven by, well, I got to have the title and I got to have the cool looking car and so forth. But I think most men, especially fathers and husbands, I think you articulated that so well for all of us, a whole group of men, right? That it's like, that's why we do all this stuff. That's why you put in the hours. That's why we're pushing to make that money, is to have that freedom and that time with the people that we love. So I love that. How do you translate that to business then? How, if I say, hey, I've got this vision, I've got this idea, do you do the exact same things with staff and followers? What's the process?
Well, what I try to do is I try to show them what's our end goal. So for example, for the mortgage business, when we launched the mortgage business, our goal was 75 million in closed loan volume our first year, which I wanted the higher ups who brought me in to be the branch manager to agree on 50 million, but they said 75 million. So I was like, okay, let's do this. So I went to everybody on the team and I said, hey, we can't hit this goal without you. This is our vision that was passed down from the higher ups, but we're taking this and we're running with it because this is what we're hired to do. So we're going to do it. What part or how big of a role do you want to play in this? Of this 75 million, how many million do you think you could contribute to this? 5 million? 7 million in closed loans, 10 million. And then they would get a little bit excited. Like, I want to play I want to play as big of a role as I can. I'm going to do 20 million or 12 million. And so one of it was just getting them to buy into the vision to where they felt like they had a role to play in the vision and that they were a key component. And without them, we would not hit our goal. So they were valuable and a key component. And then the second thing I did with them is I said, okay, let's throw a back end reward on this. You're already going to get paid for the work you do. But if you actually hit your goal and you contribute to it, whether or not the rest of the team does, we're going to reward you. So you're going to get this X amount of bonus or reward because you hit your goal, you played your role regardless of what everybody else did. And then we threw on another reward to where if everybody hit their goal and we hit the goal, there would be a team reward. So now they had incentive to help the other people because not only did they want to get their bonus or reward, they wanted to help the rest. They wanted to get the team reward that they couldn't do if they didn't get the whole team and everybody involved. So that caused a little bit more synergy, a little bit more excitement. People were working together. And so, I'm not saying that I couldn't have done more, but that's what I did in that situation. And instead of doing 75 million, we did 93 million our first year. Wow. In the mortgage business with our mortgage company. And so everybody was excited. Everybody felt they had played a role. And I felt like my job, honestly, was just to keep the morale and culture high, to highlight people's successes, to get people excited and motivated, to give them opportunities to where they could grow and help them build relationships with other realtors. And so I would say we probably have one of the best cultures I've ever seen in a mortgage company, which is typically pretty stuffy. And so it was just fun. I mean, it was probably the best year I've ever had in any business, just as far as the culture and excitement and everybody working towards the same goal.
That's phenomenal, man. I love it. Here's one of the things that I love about interviewing people like you, Richard. As soon as you start talking about that, like you light up, right?
Yeah.
You're like, oh, dude, let me tell you about this, right?
Yeah.
And so it's natural. And one of the things that I tried to do really, to be able to ask good questions as I'm sitting here taking notes, there's some things I picked out that I want to highlight for the audience too, that are, I just think really, really good. One is, and a lot of times because it's so ingrained in you, like you may not even pick up on it. So I'll point it out to you and point it out to the audience. One is you're willing to talk about it. Like when you have a goal, when you're talking about the vision, right at the very beginning, you said, well, hey, I told everybody about it. We talked about here's where it came from. Here's the direction we're headed. Like so often in leadership roles and in business, we go, oh, hey, this is the vision. Somebody talks about it one time and you're just supposed to know it, right? It'd be like, hey, if we've got this map and we're going to head from, well, I'm in Colorado and we say, well, we're going to head from here to Little Rock, Arkansas, because I have family there. It'd be like talking about it once, looking at the map one time and never reviewing it again. Right. Yeah. And so I think that's something powerful that people should write down that Richard said here is you have to be willing to continue to talk about the vision. You bring it up, you talk about it. The two other things, and I'll reframe them in my words. If I miss anything, just stop me here and be like, no, bonehead, that's not what I said. The fact that you reminded every member of the organization that their contribution is valuable. It's not about them hitting 75 million. It's about whatever their contribution is.
Right.
And that probably goes, I have to imagine just based on talking with you, it could be from the person, if you're working in business, that the receptionist, that the way they greet people with a smile and the way you answer the phone with a song in your voice, right? That's valuable, even though it may not be tied to a dollar value. Now you're talking about realtors that are tied to a dollar value as well. But the fact that you're saying, hey, there's this intrinsic value to every single person. It makes people feel special. It makes people feel good. And it makes people want to to hit that. And then I'm a big fan of rewards. I think sometimes you get a bad rap, or sales or business gets a bad rap, that it's like, oh, and we've heard this said a million times, right? In HRO, in the exit interview, they said it's not all about the money. Well, okay, that's fair, but there's also something to be said about the money. Right?
That's why you go to work.
Yeah. And so the fact that you said, hey, we tied it to a reward, the second piece of that, and leaders, people, you got to hear this. They tied it to a team reward, because so often the reward is valuable to me, yes, but there's a lot of times people will go further and do more to make sure that their teammates are hitting it too. They don't want to be that missing link. And my son played football growing up, and I think that's one of the things I remember. There's times like it's like you can have the coach on the sideline yelling and screaming your name in vain and throwing, you were a soccer player, you said, coming up, right? They're throwing the clipboard down like, come on, Richard, you got to get, but it's more powerful if one of your teammates looks across the field at you and says, hey man, you got to play your role. I'm getting my ass kicked over here. You're like, got it. Okay. So I think to highlight that, and I know you stepped through it and I'm walking back through that, but just reframing it maybe for some people, the fact that the way you lined it out is, I just think, absolutely fabulous. One other thing you brought up when you were talking earlier, because you said, hey, I did this recently and I went into this competition. You said you were cutting weight and you were participating in that yourself.
Yeah.
How do you make the decision as to what's important, what's not important, and how do you if you've decided something's not important? Because I think in business especially, there's a lot of stuff we do over and over again, and we may say, well, that's not the most important thing, but then how do we eliminate if that's the way we've always done it?
Right. Well, I try to kind of separate my life into seasons, kind of like winter, spring, summer, fall. And when I separate those seasons, I kind of try to go all in. And I actually made a post about this today, because one of the men's groups that I'm in, we talked about having a healthy, unbalanced life. And Gary Keller talks about it in his book, The One Thing, that the balanced life is kind of a myth. It's more of a pendulum. Sometimes the pendulum swings more towards work, where you just have a busier season of work. Maybe you're launching a business or you're starting a new career, and you have to put an extra 10 to 20 hours a week or so into that. And you got to have a conversation with your family and say, hey, for this next season of life, this next couple of months or whatever, daddy's going to be at work a little bit longer, or whatever the case is. Maybe you got to miss a few workouts at the gym because you're at the gym work a little later. So it's just the balance swings more towards work. And then there's other seasons of life where, you got work dialed in, you hired a new good employee, and you've delegated a lot to them. So now you have a lot more freedom, and you can swing that balance back towards your fitness. So the Q3 was my fitness time. So I like to challenge myself. Bedrock, who's a podcaster and a gym owner and a really great guy, and he says he likes to challenge himself and do something hard, several times a year. And so I was like, not only do I want to get in shape, but I want to challenge myself to the point where I'm going to expose myself at the end. I'm literally going to be on stage in board shorts and a Speedo or whatever and expose myself. I either did the work or I didn't do the work, and I will be exposed for my effort or lack of effort on that stage. So that was my hard, challenging thing I did in Q3. This Q4, I met with my team Monday, because Monday was 100 days left at the end of the year. So I gave us a big goal to hit by the end of the year, and said, hey guys, let's all contribute to this. Let's all do everything we can. Let's support each other, kind of paint the vision, what could be the reward if we hit it. And so that's kind of like my pendulum, or my healthy unbalance will swing from fitness from Q3 to a little bit more business to finish out the year strong. And then starting in the Q1 of next year, it's going to be, swinging a little bit more towards the family aspect of it. So I kind of put my life in seasons. And that doesn't mean that when I go into one of those seasons that I neglect my other areas of my life. Sure. It's actually quite the opposite. It's because I went so hard in that season that I have a whole new standard in that area. So even though I'm not focused on it near as much because I'm, focused on a different area of my life, my new standard that I had set after that hard season is higher than the average person's standard. And I don't say that in a cocky way. I just say it is, you rise and fall to your standards that you set. And when you push yourself so hard, you go all in on something, even when you dial it back a little bit in that area, your standard is now higher. Your base level is higher than where it was before, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And this ties into a lot of what I don't know which question I want to ask next, to be honest, when you're talking about being, a self-disciplined man, because you're talking about, hey, raising your standards. And I've heard that, the comment from Tony Robbins, hey, if you want better results in your life, raise your standards.
Yeah.
That's where it goes in my head. How do you define those standards, Richard? Like what is it? Do you again, is this something that somebody should be engaging in and writing them down? Do you just think it to yourself and then it's out there?
Right.
What's your process?
You always write it down. You write down everything. I don't think enough people journal. Enough people don't write down and keep track. I track almost everything in my life, because if you don't track your results and successes and failures, you don't really know where you started, where you ended, and the progress that you made. So I'm big on writing stuff down and tracking it. But yeah, I mean, I think it really just comes down to everybody's going to have a different set of values. So I can't sit on here and say, hey, you need to do this. However, I do think that most people are smart enough to know that their standards are too low. The guy who has 60 pounds to lose knows that he's given himself excuses and justifications on why he has not raised his standards. And my brother's a prime example of that. My brother's seen what I've done and transformed, and he just does not care about working out at all. He has no desire for it. And I love him, so I'm not going to try to change him, or preach to him anymore. He can see by my example. And if he wants to follow it, he can. If he doesn't, he doesn't have to. But what I try to be is the absolute best version of myself in every aspect of my life. So if I think to myself, what does the best version of my body look like? Well, I'll tell you what, the best version of my body has abs. The best version of my body has a little bit of muscle. It don't have to be a bodybuilder, but it is strong. The best version of me is a strong, capable man. When it comes to my finances, what's the best version of me in my finances? Well, debt-free, building a net worth. Well, I got to have certain standards in that area. And then go to your marriage or relationships. What's the best version of me in this relationship? Well, it's someone who is compassionate, someone who's attentive, someone who's forgiving, someone who's loving, someone who is present. So you can apply that. So really it's just sitting down and just saying, hey, what would my standards be if I was the best version of myself? And then you act out those standards. You live like that person who would have that life.
I love that, because I remember, again, early on in business, I had a trainer tell me one time, I think you encompass this so well, Richard, because I remember him saying to me, hey, write your goals down. And I do think, just as a side note, and this is my opinion, I know some people like to write them down in their notes app in their phone and all the other stuff. For me, I think it's valuable, and you might agree with me on this. Like, get a yellow notepad and physically write. There's not, if it's, it's got to be powerful, because then it is written in your own hand for accountability. And I remember someone looking at me and saying, okay, well, hey, how much do you want to make? The first time I'd made into 6 figures. And again, question came from the outside to me and said, well, are you engaging in those activities? Are you carrying yourself how that 6-figure earner would carry themselves? And I'm like, no.
That's so good. Yeah.
So it's like, okay, well, message received. One of the things, because we've talked about a lot about individual accountability, individual growth, and so forth, and these things. And when you're talking about teams too, I loved a lot of the pieces that you talked about. Hey, I talked to these people. We talked about the individual reward. We talked about the team reward. How do you find we have so many different personalities. And I don't know specifically how many people you have on your team. We've got 65 in our company and so forth. Whether you have, 1 or 2 or 3 or 6 or 65 or maybe hundreds of people, as a leader, everybody has different motivating factors, right? So how do you find a way to connect with individuals to see what their driving factors are and motivate them on an individual level?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's all about hiring, right? Like, so when I talk to people about how do you motivate your team? How do you do this? How do you cast a vision? How do you manage them? And I was like, It all starts with the hiring process. I don't
Okay.
micromanage. I don't have to do a ton with my team in certain areas because I make sure I hire people that I could see running that division with or without me. Like they're just capable people, whether it's a processor at the mortgage company, whether it's an assistant at the mortgage company, whether it's another loan officer that I'm hiring. I really focus on the hiring process. Do they fit into our culture? Are they going to add value to the culture? Are they coachable? Are they people who are humble but yet confident? Because confidence is key, but you don't want a bunch of cocky people running around. So a humble confidence is so important. But then in that hiring process, you're sitting down with them, you're asking questions, you're learning certain things. There was a period where we had everybody take a certain personality test so that we could kind of have an idea of what would drive them. It's a little bit easier in sales because most people in sales are a little bit more type A, or they're like, kind of more of a go-getter. Now, if it's not sales and you're a manager and you have people underneath you that it's a job where it's not sales, then that's where it gets a little bit different because you could have 5 employees with 5 different personalities and you're trying to motivate them. But I think the biggest thing is just your character as a leader. Most people, if they respect you as a person and they see you as a good person who is a good leader who cares for them, they're going to do their job. They're going to want to keep their job to get paid, but they're also going to want to do a good job for you. So the people I see who struggle the most in leadership, honestly, and this isn't all the time, but most of the time, it's people who with low characters, people who are drill sergeants, or they don't have enough compassion, or they're not leading the way themselves. They're telling other people to do stuff they're not willing to do. Well, you don't earn the respect of your team that way. So I would say, if there's anybody that's listening to this and they're struggling in their leadership position, take a look at yourself first. And you may not be the problem, but at least start there. Look at yourself first. What can you be doing different as a leader? And sometimes you got to go to your team. I've had to do it in the past and apologize and say, hey, I haven't led the best this quarter. I've been distracted. I've had this going on, and I want to apologize. And let's start fresh. Let's set some new goals. And I want to help you achieve what's important to you and to the company.
So powerful, man. I there's a couple of things that I hung on that you brought up. You said there's a humble confidence, right? When you know what you know, you don't have to be arrogant. And there is a fine line between confidence and overconfidence and arrogance and all that. But I think that it's important, when you have people that are training, that they know what they know. Right there at the end, you said something that is so powerful. And I think so often leaders, managers, people in business, we have this expectation. I've said this on several of my podcast episodes, that it's like, oh, you're supposed to have all the answers, right? I think it's very powerful what you just said is, hey, when you don't have all the answers, or if you've made a mistake, just offer a genuine apology. That'll carry you further than trying to cover it up or trying to fix it behind the scenes, right?
Yeah. I mean, most people have never had a boss or a manager ever apologize to them for anything. So like you do that, and the first thing they do is gain instant respect for you because they're like, wow, that you're humble enough to do that. So I think that's really important.
That really takes being a willingness to have your ego bruised too. A couple of things here, just so I don't forget again, for anybody listening to the show, make sure you connect with Richard. You can check out his Instagram. It's instagram.com/Richard Bischoff. It's RichardBischoff. You connect with him there. I'm sure he's got his links and the information that he shares when he's talking about the Stronger Men's Club and so forth. He also has that community group, and you have an opportunity right now, as you mentioned right here. The first 100 members. You said first 100 members are free as part of that community. So you go to school.com. That's SKOOL.com. And I'll have this link in the show notes. It's the-stronger-men-club-4756. So make sure to check Richard's community out there. I'm going to go sign up for it. I'm genuinely, awesome. I would love to connect with you more. So there's 99 spots left, y'all. So hey, do me a favor with respect for your time and such as well. Any final thoughts, kind of taking us out? We're about that 45-minute mark. So any final thoughts you want to leave people with today?
Yeah, I mean, one of your questions that you had in the email notes was, what was something that a leader in the past that I've really looked up to? What was a quality that they had that
Yes.
really made me look up to them? And I would say it was a mixture of that humble confidence with such a powerful vision that whatever he said he was going to do, I knew he would do it. I knew he would be successful at it, and I wanted to be a part of it. It was one of those things that a lot of times people promise you the world, and you know that they're lying, or you know that they're not going to do everything they said they were going to do. But
Sure.
that was it. So my challenge to myself and people I talk to is become that type of leader. And you do that first through leading yourself. You got to create a success story. Why would anybody want to follow you? If you are not a success story with your health or with your business or with whatever it is you're trying to get people to follow you with, then nobody's going to follow you. So one, prove that success in yourself and prove it over and over enough by your character and who you are, that people know that whatever you do, you're going to be successful to the point where they don't want to miss out on that. If they can ride a coattail and just get a little bit of success on the way, they want to do it. And that's a big thing when it comes to leadership, is just being so, and I guess it's when what you say and what you think and what you do all align, because it's just like such a person of character and people know they can trust it and they want to follow it and they want to be a part of it.
That's wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for that wisdom on the way out here, man. I appreciate it. Thank you so much for joining me on the show today. It's been a wonderful conversation. And if you would just hang out for a minute while I take us out. Okay.
Yeah, it's been an honor. Thank you.
Absolutely. Folks, that's going to bring us to a close for another episode of the Leadership Toolkit. Do me a favor, a couple of things. One, throw some thumbs up on here. If you see whichever social media platform you see it on, if you're here on YouTube and on Spotify, throw some thumbs up on there. That is one way that it helps the show grow. And secondly, the most important thing, and I just love conversations like this with Richard, because he's somebody who's in it. He's somebody that lives it. He's somebody that exemplifies what it is to be a boots on the ground leader. Like he's doing the things he talks about, and you can tell that in the conversation. He brought a ton of insight and wisdom today. So if you know somebody that would gain something from this episode, do me a favor and share it with them. That's the one thing I would ask you this afternoon. Share this out. And until we speak next, I appreciate your time. I really do. Thank you so much, everyone. Until we speak next, stay great. We'll talk soon, everybody.